I want to introduce the next session. We are in this age where with technology you can take what it knows about customers and use this to develop and deliver really relevant communications. But of course, as we know, third-party cookies are going away. Communicating to anonymous customers is becoming the rule rather than the exception. And if you can identify customers, however, the game really changes. So that is going to be the crux of this conversation. So I want to invite our speakers up here to please come and join us for a great conversation on mastering identity and performance marketing. Elizabeth Pilkington, VP of eCommerce at McLaughlin, and Jack Riker, VP of Revenue at Wunderkind.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, good morning. How's everybody doing? Great, good. Well, I'm so honored to be up here with Elizabeth to talk today about a really exciting topic. It was a great intro by Scott, but I'll give a quick intro myself. I'm Jack. I run revenue here at Wunderkind. As Scott mentioned, we help brands identify anonymous traffic, scale their own channels, and make the most of those own channels. And I'm so honored to be up here with Elizabeth talking to you today about mastering identity and performance marketing. So before we kick into it, I know we got a little bit of a brief intro, but would love for you to introduce yourself, maybe tell a little bit about the brand, McLaughlin, the history, the evolution, and what you guys are all about.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. So I've been with McLaughlin about 10 years now. The brand was founded in 1977, so we've been around for about 50 years. So as you can imagine, we've definitely seen some change and evolution. We've evolved the aesthetic very much of the brand. It was founded in like classic sportswear prep. So since then, have evolved the aesthetic, the taste and values of our customers evolved, category extensions, men's footwear. So we've grown the customer file, the composition, of that file has changed. But I would say very much at the core, quality is essential to our customer. And I think that, really expands to every interaction with the brand, from the marketing to in-store to online. And our founder, Kevin McLaughlin, likes to say, make a customer, not a sale, which sounds, I know, very cheesy, but when you think about going into a store, right, I think his biggest pet peeve is if you go into a store and immediately, the associate is on top of you and just not giving you the breath to really browse at your leisure, and instead of assisting, they're kind of interfering more. So, we try and bring that to life definitely online and replicate that in-store experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. For anyone who's ever been both either online at jmclaughlin.com or to a McLaughlin store, you feel the quality, you feel the experience. And I think it's something that is really amazing to see that throughout the brand.
Are you wearing McLaughlin today?
I'm not right now. I messed that one up. Next time. Tomorrow. See you all tomorrow. Get ready for day 3. I'll be wearing McLaughlin. So you mentioned kind of the evolution of your file, starting more classic sportswear and evolving, bringing on new customers. And you've now done a really great job, especially online, of making sure that we capture first-party data, but we're also using that first-party data in a really intentional way through a number of different channels. I know email and text and a couple other uses. So can you talk to me a little bit about how you think about your own channels, whether it be the different strategies or purposes for those channels, and how you communicate with your customers?
Yeah, so we definitely try and be intentional. I think different strategies, different tactics. Obviously, you are holding them to different standards and different KPI. So for something like email and text, it's very much about LTV and retention. I think we get about 30% more orders from a customer that's emailable. I think we're 3 times more likely to reactivate somebody, so it's extremely meaningful to their engagement with the brand. But I think it goes beyond that. It's also not just about, are you emailable? It's serving them relevant content so that they want to engage. And that definitely does take understanding the customer. Our loyalists need newness. They need a consistent pacing of newness, but they also will engage with those sort of lighter touch points, like downloads on store events and philanthropic efforts, things like that. So, that content that we're serving a loyalist is going to be very different than a discovery touch point email or a capture experience for an acquisition customer. But I also think that using then those cohorts that are maturing for other tactics. So like we use our loyalists for lookalike tactics for acquisition, and just really understanding exactly the purpose of the cohort and then the content that they're receiving. You know, we try and pay attention to that all the time.
Yeah, that's amazing, right? And I think that something you mentioned there that's particularly interesting, right, is owned channels are great for driving LTV. They're great for making sure that we're having meaningful connections with customers, but they also can be doing things like helping with our paid channels as well, which is fantastic in terms of lookalike audiences for our loyalists. So, you know, owned channels and first-party data is incredibly powerful, right? But the very first step in that is actually how do you collect that data, right? How do you make sure that you can incentivize that consumer to give that first-party data? How have you guys been thinking about that? What are maybe some of the tests that you guys have been running or some of the learnings that you've had in terms of actually enticing that consumer to give that first-party data?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy, and I also think like a big part of that is not just enticing them to give, but it's also making sure that if they are choosing to opt out of a specific tactic, you're making that as frictionless as possible. You know, I think that frustration, you know, that you can feel from not being able to opt out of specific tactics can really lead to kind of not wanting to engage with the brand as a whole. And ideally, that is, of course, not what you want. So, you know, from that aspect, obviously, we want to be as transparent as possible. But I also think it's about, you know, training our customer service team and our in-store team on all of the different marketing initiatives we have, so that if a customer has a question about, you know, why did I receive this, or, you know, I got this catalog, or I don't remember opting in for email, they're very well versed in all the different kind of communications we have out there, so that they can assist and not be caught off guard. But then in addition to that, you know, there's a lot of testing that goes on. I definitely think, you know, email capture was something we were struggling with. I feel like it kind of just became this thing people would click past and kind of skip over. It was just the norm, this pop-up for give us your email. So testing different gamification experiences has been really key and has paid off really well. And then I also think really giving people the option to receive communication how they want to. So if you prefer to receive SMS over email, making sure that we are set up and have the infrastructure to be able to optimize the communication and the touch point based on where the customer wants to engage with us, not just sending it to them across all touch points, but really having the suppression logic and the segmentation in place to curate and segment.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting. You know, it's not just about, I use the word entice, right? I mean, it's not the right word, but how do we capture, but then also you had to continue to earn their continued loyalty of actually receiving those communications. And that's where you have to say, all right, well, how do you actually want to be communicated with? And make sure you meet them where they are, give them opportunity to be able to opt out of certain types of communication if they don't want, and continue to earn their trust as a customer, and continue to deliver that value, you know, just like we do in our in-store experiences through all of our online communication. Yeah.
And I think it's like that due diligence too, right? Because, you know, there are going to be some customers that you're not getting the feedback from. So I think it is digging into the data, especially for us, you know, if they have purchasing more in-store versus online, then for any type of new collection launch or promotion launch, we'll let the associates do that outreach and suppress them from that sort of marketing message, because obviously they would prefer to interact with the store, and, you know, for us that's fine. We just want them to engage with the brand.
Absolutely, yeah. That's amazing. And being able to have the infrastructure there to make sure that, you know, you guys are messaging people in the channels they want, but also have the suppression logic like you mentioned, so that they have a certain type of way they want to be communicated to, whether it be from in-store associates or from the general online batch and blast. They've got that option. I think that's fantastic. And I want to we'll get back to some of that in-store technology maybe in a couple questions, but I want to ask a question around the state of the industry, some of the macro things that you've seen over the past couple of years. I think, you know, for all the different retailers and for the folks who work with retailers all day long, you know, 4 years ago, there was a lot of conversations about grow at all costs, right? We need to grow, we need to capture market share. Of course, we want to do it profitably, but, you know, we want to make sure that we are just growing. Now, the past couple of years, there's been a big shift, and I want to ask: have you felt that shift as well in terms of trying to maybe grow, not necessarily grow at all costs, but growth is the primary metric now to being, all right, we need to make sure that we're growing profitably, and how do owned channels work in that mix? So they have an impact in terms of your profitability and how you're reaching out to people, or how does Jay McLaughlin and yourself think about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely felt that. I think everyone has. I think a couple things. We've tried to push our partners to get more efficient, to unlock dollars that normally would be backed to savings or reinvested in sort of bottom funnel initiatives, but basically unlocking dollars at the bottom to try and then move up the top. So I think for the CFOs out there, it's a better argument to be made if you're kind of reinvesting dollars that were already in the budget. So easier said than done, but if possible, that's kind of what we've pushed our partners to do. I also think testing has come up a lot, but it's so important to just make sure to consistently be reevaluating the assumptions you're making. So quarterly, bi-monthly, we're retesting, doing holdout tests, especially for acquisition tactics, to really validate the incrementality. And I think it's also looking at how maybe things that aren't as measurable could be impacting incrementality. So like we've seen some tactics around trade areas go down in terms of incrementality because we're opening up new stores, because we're investing in more brand awareness tactics. So basically you don't need as heavy of a conversion touch point if you have sort of those other things, those supporting brand touch points at work. In addition, I think that we have pushed to go a little bit further up the funnel. We've historically based a lot of our acquisition on performance conversion driven campaigns, but really understanding that that is a short-term return and looking beyond maybe in-year sales and understanding how kind of consideration campaigns, mid-funnel campaigns that we did in Q3, Q4 of last year could have really impacted Q1 and Q2 new users and new people to the brand. So I don't think it's a exact perfect science. I think it's an accumulation of a lot of due diligence and testing.
Yeah, it sounds like it's just getting, understanding really what is driving consumer behavior, trying to get a little bit more efficient bottom of funnel, but also now taking a different look at our top of funnel, right? You mentioned LTV as like a primary driver for our own channels before, but even now looking at what's the LTV that we get from folks? What's the long-term return that we get from folks from these acquisition channels? Maybe it's not so much of a last click return that we're seeing at the top of funnel, but these are folks that are going to become loyal customers, quarter, year over year. I think that's amazing. And you mentioned before how you were using some first-party data to better inform some of your paid acquisition strategies. You mind expanding on that a little bit more? Because I think it's something that's super important. Again, as folks collect this first-party data, making the most of it through their first-party communication channels, but also then taking those learnings and expanding that to maybe third-party channels or paid or media channels. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the work you've done there?
Yeah. So, I think lookalike modeling is kind of the standard. I think everybody out here is probably doing that, but I also think it's modeling and looking at the different elements that lead to a higher LTV, right? So does inviting them to store events essentially lead to a better engagement with the brand? Are there certain category purchases or, basically, we found that if you're purchasing some of our knit tops, which was sort of one of the core products the brand really launched on and is in a signature cloth of ours, you actually tend to be a more valuable customer than purchasing other categories. We know that footwear and handbags tend to be an easier first purchase for some new customers versus some apparel categories. So trying to seed that information basically in the campaigns we're creating, specifically on social. So breaking out an accessories campaign and prospecting, knowing that that's going to probably be more efficient because it tends to be a new customer purchase, but then adding in like that knit top as that retargeting kind of dynamic product so that we can make sure that we're also aiming to kind of increase their value with the brand. So, I think it's a mix, but it's also just thinking a little bit outside the box and essentially, again, how you can really seed the platforms to steer them in the right direction. Because I think, anything you can give them that's going to just improve efficiency, it can't hurt. Again, those are assumptions, so then there's the testing piece of it. And whenever we have a theory like this or an assumption, we'll validate in testing and then scale.
Yeah. I mean, you hear a lot of the art and science of marketing. It sounds like the scientific method is something that is, to make it in simple terms, like really important, right? We've got these hypotheses, things that we might have learned from our own channels or from looking at our CRM data, but we're going to make some hypotheses, and we need to test that, time over time again, to make sure we continue to prove out that value. I think that's fantastic. We talked a little earlier about in-store and online. For a lot of brands, especially historic brands, there's been a big transformation of they had these big in-store presences, and now how do they start bringing that experience online? Now I feel like we're in a little bit of a new world where it's like, great, we've got these great online experiences. How do we start bringing some of those things in-store? How have you guys thought about maybe bridging the gap between the in-store experience and the online experience? Is there technology that you're super excited about? Is there technology that we're missing in terms of being able to do that? Or how do you and Jay McLaughlin think about bridging that gap?
Yeah, so I think fundamentally, obviously we want to make the experiences frictionless for the customer. So of course, being able to return anywhere, basically get your hand on any piece of merchandise and not have to worry about any of the post-order communications, have full transparency of tracking. So that I feel like is the foundation, bare bones. But it's also, I guess, for us, very much trying to bring the associates' expertise also into the online experience. So integrating them in with live chat if we've got like some off-season stores that are a little bit kind of out of their peak. How can we leverage them in the chat experience when it comes to people with product sizing questions? There's no one better to answer that than an in-store associate. So that's something that we've experimented with and are really hoping to find a better way to scale. I also think that leveraging basically reviews and digital assets and bring that into the store experience. We do have some stores that have videos, so playing those brand videos has been just a really nice way to spotlight the new collection. But really it's a balance. I wouldn't say it's one versus the other. It's how do you have the two complement each other and leverage them for their strengths, right? Like the expertise in store, and of course the reach and limitless capacity and the fast-paced movement of the online world. So it's a constant work in progress. But I just think keeping the two stories aligned and closely linked and communication is key. Yeah,
and it sounds like from before also there's even some first-party data capture from the store associates. Are they in the checkout flow or actually collecting the phone numbers from those folks to be able to then manage the communication themselves, or?
Yes, they are. So definitely we are capturing, of course, the first-party data, but also how did you hear about us? Because I think there's, at least 70% of customers are buying in the store. So to not have visibility into, how they are being introduced to the brand is a pretty big gap. Yeah. So they're great at collecting that. And of course, the email and phone information so that we can have that point of contact. I also think they're very good at, not pushing too hard. Also offering, we have a catalog, so would you prefer to just be mailed? Giving frequency options for email and SMS, so it's not just this all or nothing, can we have your contact information and then we will send you everything we have all the time. I think it's very important to have that conversation with the customer as you're capturing this information so that they're very clear on what they're opting into, what they can expect to receive. I think that setting that expectation is really a big piece to the success.
Yeah. We're making sure that we're earning that communication, we're earning that data from them, and that we're setting the expectation that, it's not a, to quote Sabrina Carpenter, please submit your email, right? But making sure that we're actually showing the value and explaining what they're getting and then giving them the option to have that great experience. I think that's
there's a level of trust there that I think, has to be respected.
100%. So we're at Commerce Next 2024. So everyone's always wondering what is next in commerce, right? If we're sitting here in 2025, any thoughts in terms of what might be next, what people will be talking about, what people will be excited about at the next Commerce Next?
I mean, I think everyone's probably going to say AI. I'm also hoping, I think that, definitely I'm sure returns and new customer acquisition are probably top of mind for a lot of especially apparel brands, but definitely innovations around fit prediction and really kind of being able to kind of experience the product on you or in your closet, or any type of sort of, virtual styling is also going to be, I would be excited for that. And I don't think it's fully reached its potential yet.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Well, I know there's a lot of great technologies here today. We've got a lot of super exciting brands, so I'm hoping that folks, as we get to network and learn more, maybe we'll have some exciting things that we'll bring in next year to the stage. But for now, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. I would love to do Q&A, but if you want to do Q&A, you can either find us at the Wunderkind booth, or you can find Elizabeth, walking around the show. But for now, thank you so much for joining us on stage. I really appreciate the time, and thanks to all for paying attention.